Hi students, welcome to Preliminary Chemistry and the energy topic. This is video number 2, Production of Carbohydrates. In the last video we looked at the process of photosynthesis and the fact that it is a process that allows the conversion of light energy into chemical energy in the form of chemical bonds. In this video we want to have a little bit of a look at the process of photosynthesis in just a little bit more detail, and also to look at the consequences of that process and what it means for us in terms of chemists. So photosynthesis is essentially a two-stage process. Now, I say that knowing that we have oversimplified this process a little bit. In fact, there's sub-components of each of these processes, but we want to just have a look at the two main processes. The first process is the light phase. This is the phase that needs light to occur, so it occurs only during the daytime or when the plants are exposed to energy from the visible spectrum of light. This part occurs in the thylakoid, in those little stacked grana that I talked about in the previous video. Absorbed light is directed towards a reaction center in the chlorophyll protein matrix. There's a couple of photosystems that are part of this thylakoid membrane, as well as a series of protein molecules as well. And the structure is a little on the complex side for this level of chemistry, so we don't go into it in a lot of detail here, but certainly there's a lot of information on the internet if you want to look at it in a little bit more detail. Primarily, red and blue or violet wavelengths of light are used to excite the chlorophyll molecules and effectively energize the electrons. So we get free energized electrons as consequence of the light energy coming through. Now they're going to move through an electron transport chain and ultimately going to be the result of oxidation of water molecules. Now we have looked at the processes of oxidation and reduction in the past to remember our oil rig. So oxidation is loss of electrons, and here they are in this equation over here. So they're a product, which means they've been lost from the water molecule. The water molecules get broken down into oxygen molecules and hydrogen ions. There's a couple of important transporters here that are part of this process, and again, it's a little beyond what we need to look at in terms of the actual chemistry involved. But the main thing to realize is that this first part of the process is about breaking the hydrogen-oxygen bonds in the water molecules, reforming oxygen molecules, and releasing free electrons and protons, hydrogen ions, in solution for the next part. And the next part is called the carbon fixing phase, the first part of which is called the Calvin cycle. And effectively, this is quite a complex series of steps, but the main thing that happens is that we are fixing that free hydrogen, if you like, the hydrogen ions, the protons that were coming as part of the breakdown of the water molecules, to our carbon dioxide in order to form, via a number of intermediates such as PGA, G3P, and so on, glucose. So this is our goal molecule, if you like, and this occurs in a cycle, the Calvin cycle, and a series of reductions are part of this process that ultimately results in the formation of our glucose and also some water molecules. Now this is an important thing when you look at these two steps, because all of the oxygen that's produced from photosynthesis comes from the light phase, comes from the breakdown of water molecules. There are water molecules that are generated as a component of the reduction of the carbon dioxide, and you can see reduction is gain, rig, and here is the gaining of those electrons in order to produce the glucose molecules. Now this occurs in the stroma, which is a fluid-filled region, and obviously there needs to be transporters that are carrying these ions or electrons from one to the other. And without going to them in too much detail at this stage, ADP, ATP. These are the ones, and NADP and NADPH, the ones that are doing a lot of the transporting from one of these systems to the next. The important thing that we need to be aware of, and really there's a huge amount involved in the process of photosynthesis, and certainly well beyond what we need to know. Now you can have a little bit of a look if you want more background, but the key is, firstly, it's actually an endothermic process. Energy is taken in to facilitate this process, and then that extra energy is locked up in those glucose molecules. So that for each mole of glucose formed, 2,803 kilojoules of energy is required. This is a big energy requirement, and this is why the sun is a great source of this energy. Covalent bonds linking the atoms in the glucose molecules store that chemical energy along with any other carbohydrates. So the simple glucose sugars can be added to fruit sugars like fructose, or just to other glucose molecules to form disaccharides like maltose, or polysaccharides like starch or cellulose. These carbohydrates are our energy hit. They're the ones that are used for energy requirements for the process of respiration, both aerobic and anaerobic respiration, and they basically are the form in which the energy from the sun can be fixed into a chemical form which is usable by both plants and animals. And without the photosynthetic plants, that energy would not be available. This is the goal then, glucose, which is a 6-carbon compound. You'll notice that the ring structure, it can exist as a linear structure or as a ring structure, and the ring structure contains 5 of the carbons plus an oxygen in that ring. And something that we will have a look at in a little bit of detail later on. The important things about glucose is that it is water soluble, so it can be transported in solution around not only the cells within the leaf, beyond those cells, and also through the phloem tissue up and down the plant. Glucose is the main source of energy for plants, but also when they are consumed by animals, it's the key for them as well. And this glucose can be released in the process of respiration, which is an exothermic process, one that actually releases energy, which is what we want, and again forms those products of carbon dioxide and water, which is one of the reasons why people often talk about respiration and photosynthesis as being reverse processes, even though there's a lot more complexity rather than those overall equations. So just finally then, the storing of the glucose is necessary because not all the glucose is immediately required by the plant, so it needs to be able to store that, and there's various ways that it can do that. Simple polymers like starch, more complex ones like cellulose are also storage forms, and each of these are ways of storing these high energy compounds in a form that can be utilized by the organisms at some later stage. This is a big overview of the importance of carbohydrates and how useful they are as carriers of potential energy, chemical energy, which can then be released up in different organisms. That's probably where I'll leave it for this particular video. There's been a lot of information to digest, and we'll look at the longer term implications of the process of photosynthesis in things like fossil fuels in the next video. Thanks for watching.